The dust had barely settled on the grave when Harrison Everett noticed the bride standing alone at the church window. Her white dress, already fading to the color of ash in the harsh Nevada sun. It was August 1878, and Taylorsville, Nevada, was nothing more than a collection of weathered buildings clinging to life in the middle of nowhere. Harrison had ridden into town that morning looking for work, his horse exhausted, and his stomach empty after 3 days on the trail. He had not expected to stumble upon a wedding, and he certainly had not expected to see what happened next. The groom, a merchant named Samuel Brooks, had taken one look at his bride and bolted. Just walked right out of the church as if he had forgotten something important at his store. Harrison watched from across the street as the man mounted his horse and rode out of town without a backward glance. The whole thing lasted maybe 5 minutes from start to finish. Now the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and red, and the bride was still standing there. Harrison had watched people filter out of the church throughout the afternoon, their faces a mixture of pity and relief that this scandal had not touched their own families. But nobody stayed. Nobody went to her. Harrison tied his horse to the post outside the church and climbed the steps. His boots echoed on the wooden floorboards as he entered. The bride did not turn around, even though she must have heard him. "Miss," Harrison said softly, "you should not be here alone." She finally moved just slightly, her shoulders tensing. "Everyone keeps saying that." Her voice was hoarse, as if she had been crying for hours. "Yet nobody stays." Harrison stepped closer, careful not to startle her. In the fading light, he could see her reflection in the window. She was young, probably around 21, with dark hair pinned up in an elaborate style that was already coming loose. Her face was pale, her eyes rimmed red. "I am Harrison Everett," he said. "I just rode into town today. I do not know you or your situation, but I know what it is like to be alone. Would you let me walk you home?" She turned then, finally looking at him. Her eyes were a startling shade of green, and despite the tears and the devastation written across her face, Harrison felt something shift in his chest. She was beautiful, but that was not what caught him. It was the way she looked at him, as if she could not quite believe he was real. "Helena Emerson," she said quietly, "and I do not have a home anymore. Samuel owned the house where I was staying. I suppose that belongs to him alone now." Harrison frowned. "What about your family?" Helena looked away. "My father arranged this marriage. He is a rancher 2 days' ride from here. When I wrote to him last month with concerns about Samuel, he told me to be grateful any man would have me at 21 and unmarried." Her voice cracked. "I suppose he was wrong about that last part." The church was growing dark now, and Harrison could barely make out her features. He moved to light one of the lamps hanging on the wall, and warm light flooded the space. Helena flinched, as if she had been hoping the darkness would swallow her whole. "Listen," Harrison said, keeping his voice gentle. "I passed a boarding house on my way into town. Let me take you there. You can get a room for the night and figure out your next steps in the morning." Helena laughed, but there was no humor in it. "With what money? Everything I own is in that house, including the small inheritance my mother left me. Samuel convinced me to put it in his name for safekeeping after we married." She paused. "We were supposed to be married by now. I suppose that makes it theft." Harrison felt anger rising in his chest, hot and sudden. He had seen a lot of cruelty in his 30 years, but something about this situation struck him as particularly vicious. To abandon someone at the altar was one thing. To leave them destitute was another entirely. "Wait here," he said. Before Helena could protest, he strode out of the church and across the street to where Samuel Brooks' general store stood dark and locked. Harrison was not a violent man by nature, but he was practical. He picked up a rock from the street and smashed it through the window. The sound of breaking glass cut through the quiet evening. Harrison reached through carefully, unlocked the door, and let himself inside. He knew what he was looking for. Men like Samuel Brooks always kept their important papers in the same place, thinking they were clever. Sure enough, behind the counter was a small safe and beside it, a lockbox that had not been secured. Inside the lockbox, Harrison found a stack of papers. He shuffled through them until he found what he needed. A document signed by Helena Emerson, transferring her inheritance to Samuel Brooks upon their marriage. The marriage that had never happened. Harrison took the paper and a small leather pouch he found beside it. He opened the pouch and counted out $200 in gold coins. That seemed about right for a woman's inheritance in these parts. He put the coins back in the pouch, tucked both items into his jacket, and walked back across the street. Helena was still standing where he had left her, but now she was watching the store with wide eyes. "What did you do?" "Got back what belongs to you," Harrison said, handing her the pouch and the paper. "That document is worthless now since you never married. The money is yours." Helena stared at the items in her hands as if they might disappear. "You broke into his store." "I did. You could be arrested." "Maybe," Harrison acknowledged, "but I have been arrested before. I can handle it. Can you handle another night with nothing?" For the first time since he had entered the church, Helena smiled. It was small and tentative, but it transformed her face. "Nobody ever stayed before," she whispered. "Nobody ever did something like this for me." Harrison felt that shift in his chest again, stronger this time. "Well," he said, "I am staying now. Come on. Let us get you that room." The boarding house was run by a widow named Mrs. Patterson, a stern-faced woman in her 50s who took one look at Helena's wedding dress and Harrison's dusty traveling clothes and raised an eyebrow. But she accepted Helena's money without comment and showed her to a small room on the second floor. "Thank you," Helena said to Harrison as they stood in the hallway. "I do not know how to repay you." "You do not need to repay me," Harrison said. "Just get some rest. Things will look clearer in the morning." But as Harrison lay in his own rented room that night, sleep eluded him. He could not stop thinking about Helena standing alone in that church, waiting for someone to care enough to stay. He had been drifting from town to town for the past 5 years, taking odd jobs and never settling anywhere long enough to form attachments. It was safer that way. Easier. Yet something about Helena Emerson made him want to stay. The next morning, Harrison woke to shouting in the street. He dressed quickly and headed downstairs to find a small crowd gathered outside Samuel Brooks' store. The merchant himself was standing in the doorway, gesticulating wildly while Sheriff Thomas Crane took notes. Harrison had known this was coming. He walked over calmly, his hands visible at his sides. "Sheriff, I am the one who broke in." The crowd turned to stare at him. Samuel Brooks' face turned an ugly shade of red. "Arrest him. He is a thief." Sheriff Crane, a weathered man with gray in his beard, looked Harrison up and down. "That true?" "I broke the window and entered the store," Harrison confirmed. "But I did not steal anything. I retrieved property that belonged to Miss Helena Emerson, property that Mr. Brooks here was holding illegally after he abandoned her at the altar yesterday." A murmur ran through the crowd. Samuel sputtered. "That money was given to me willingly." "The document transferring ownership was contingent on your marriage," Harrison said calmly. "Since you chose not to marry Miss Emerson, the transfer is void. You were holding her property illegally." Sheriff Crane rubbed his jaw thoughtfully. "That true, Samuel. You leave Miss Emerson at the altar." Samuel's face grew even redder. "That is between me and her. This man broke into my store to retrieve stolen property," Harrison pointed out. "I would be happy to discuss this matter in front of a judge if necessary." "Now hold on," Sheriff Crane said, holding up a hand. "Samuel, is what he is saying accurate? Did you take Miss Emerson's inheritance before the marriage?" Samuel looked around at the crowd, clearly realizing that public opinion was not on his side. Taylorsville was a small town, and word of his actions yesterday had spread quickly. "She gave it to me for safekeeping," he said defensively. "And when you did not marry her, did you plan to give it back?" The sheriff asked. Samuel said nothing. Sheriff Crane sighed. "Go on home, Samuel. You got your window broken, but I would say that is fair payment for trying to steal from a woman you abandoned. Mr. Everett, I suggest you pay for that window to be fixed, and we will call this matter settled." Harrison nodded. "Fair enough, Sheriff." As the crowd dispersed, Harrison saw Helena emerging from the boarding house. She had changed out of her wedding dress and was wearing a simple blue cotton dress that brought out the color of her eyes. Her hair was down now, falling in dark waves past her shoulders. She looked younger somehow and less burdened. She walked over to him, ignoring Samuel entirely. "I heard what you did," she said. "You did not have to face the sheriff for me." "Yes, I did," Harrison said simply. "It was the right thing to do." Helena studied his face for a long moment. "Why are you really here in Taylorsville, Harrison Everett? The truth." Harrison considered lying, then decided she deserved better. "I am running from my past," he admitted. "Nothing criminal if that worries you. But I lost someone 5 years ago, my wife and baby daughter. Fever took them both in the span of a week. After that, I could not stand to stay in one place. Every town reminded me of what I lost." Helena's expression softened. "I am sorry." "It was a long time ago," Harrison said, though the pain still felt fresh sometimes. "But when I saw you standing alone in that church yesterday, I thought about how my Sarah would have wanted someone to help her if our situations had been reversed. So I stayed." "I am glad you did," Helena said quietly. Then, more firmly, "I need to leave Taylorsville. My father will hear about what happened, and he will either try to force me into another unwanted marriage or disown me entirely. Either way, I cannot stay here." Harrison nodded slowly. "Where will you go?" "I do not know," Helena admitted. "I have money now, thanks to you. I could go to California. I have heard there are opportunities for women in San Francisco." "It is a long journey," Harrison said. "Dangerous for a woman traveling alone." Helena met his eyes. "Are you offering to accompany me?" The question hung in the air between them. Harrison knew he should say no. He had learned the hard way that caring about people only led to pain. But he looked at Helena, really looked at her, and saw something he had not seen in 5 years: possibility. "Yes," he said. "I will take you to San Francisco if that is where you want to go." Helena smiled, and it was like the sun breaking through clouds. "Then let us leave today, before Samuel tries something else or my father comes looking for me." They spent the morning preparing for the journey. Harrison bought supplies with what little money he had left, while Helena settled her account with Mrs. Patterson and purchased practical traveling clothes. By early afternoon, they were ready to depart. As Harrison helped Helena onto her newly purchased horse, Sheriff Crane approached them. "Heading out?" he asked. "Yes, sir," Harrison said. "No reason to stay," the sheriff nodded. "Figured as much. Listen, son, I do not know what your story is, but you did right by Miss Emerson. That took courage." He paused, then added, "Samuel's been causing trouble in this town for a while now. You may have done us all a favor by standing up to him." "Just tried to help," Harrison said. "Well, you did more than that." Sheriff Crane tipped his hat to Helena. "Safe travels, Miss Emerson. I hope California treats you better than Nevada did." "Thank you, Sheriff," Helena said warmly. They rode out of Taylorsville heading west, the late summer sun beating down on them. For the first few hours, they rode in comfortable silence, both lost in their own thoughts. The landscape around them was harsh and beautiful, all red rock and sparse vegetation, with mountains rising in the distance. As evening approached, Harrison began looking for a suitable place to camp. He found a spot near a small creek, sheltered by a cluster of juniper trees. While he tended to the horses and built a fire, Helena unpacked their supplies and began preparing a simple meal of beans and salt pork. "You know how to handle yourself out here," Helena observed as they ate. "Have you spent a lot of time traveling?" "Most of the past 5 years," Harrison said. "After Sarah and Emma died, I sold our farm in Missouri and just started riding. I have worked as a ranch hand, a deputy, a freight driver, whatever needed doing." "Did it help?" Helena asked softly. "The traveling," Harrison considered the question. "Sometimes. Other times it felt like I was just running in circles, trying to escape grief that followed me everywhere." He poked at the fire with a stick. "What about you? How did you end up agreeing to marry Samuel Brooks?" Helena's expression darkened. "My father arranged it. He owns a cattle ranch outside of Carson City, and Samuel's store supplied us with goods. They made a business arrangement and I was part of the deal." She paused. "I know I should be grateful. 21 is old to be unmarried, and my father made it clear I was a burden, but Samuel was cold. Mean, even. He would say cruel things about my appearance, about how lucky I was that he was willing to marry me at all." "He was wrong," Harrison said firmly. "You are beautiful, Helena. But more than that, you are brave. You stood in that church all day waiting for something to change. That takes strength." Helena looked at him across the fire, her green eyes reflecting the flames. "Nobody ever stayed before," she repeated softly. "Everyone in my life has either left me or treated me as if I was a burden to be managed. My mother died when I was 12. My father remarried within 6 months, and his new wife made it clear she had no interest in raising another woman's daughter. I have spent the past 9 years feeling invisible in my own home." "You are not invisible," Harrison said. "I see you." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. Helena drew in a shaky breath. "Harrison, why are you really doing this? You do not know me. You owe me nothing." Harrison set down his plate and leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. "When Sarah died, I thought I would never feel anything again. For 5 years, I have just been going through the motions of living without actually being alive. But yesterday, when I saw you standing in that church, something in me woke up." He met her eyes. "I cannot explain it. I just knew I had to stay, I had to help you." "And now?" Helena asked. "Now I want to keep knowing you," Harrison admitted. "I want to hear your story and be part of your future, even if that future is just traveling to California together. Is that all right?" Helena smiled, and this time there were tears in her eyes, but they seemed to be happy ones. "Yes," she said. "That is more than all right." They talked late into the night, sharing stories of their pasts and their hopes for the future. Harrison learned that Helena loved to read, but had rarely been allowed access to books. That she had a beautiful singing voice, but had been told by her stepmother to keep quiet. That she dreamed of opening a library someday, a place where anyone could come and lose themselves in stories. Helena learned that Harrison had grown up on a farm, that his father had taught him to be honest and hardworking above all else. That he had loved his wife deeply, but had known her for less than a year before she died. That he played the harmonica, but had not touched the instrument since he had lost his family. When they finally bedded down for the night, Harrison on one side of the fire and Helena on the other, both felt less alone than they had in years. The next day brought challenges. The trail west was rough, winding through rocky terrain that tested both their horses and their own endurance. Around midday, they encountered a group of travelers heading east, a family with 2 young children packed into a wagon. "You folks heading to California?" The father called out as they approached. "Yes, sir," Harrison replied. "How are the trails ahead?" The man's expression grew serious. "Passable, but there has been some trouble near the border. Group of outlaws robbing travelers. Lost most of our savings to them 3 days back." He glanced at his wife, who was holding a sleeping child. "That is why we are turning back. Not worth the risk." Harrison felt Helena tense beside him. "How many outlaws?" he asked. "4, maybe 5, the man said. "They are set up in a canyon pass about 2 days' ride from here. Only way through unless you want to add a week to your journey going around." "Thank you for the warning," Harrison said. He reached into his saddlebag and pulled out some of their dried meat. "Here, for your children." The man looked surprised but grateful. "Bless you, friend. Watch yourselves out there." After the family had moved on, Helena turned to Harrison. "What do? We have choices," Harrison said carefully. "We can go around, which adds time but is safer. We can try to pass through the canyon and hope we avoid the outlaws. Or we can wait here for a few days and see if the situation resolves itself." Helena thought for a moment. "I do not want to wait. Every day we delay is a day my father might catch up with us." She straightened in her saddle. "Let us try the canyon. We will be careful." Harrison admired her courage even as he worried about the danger. "All right, but we do this smart. We will scout ahead before we commit to the pass, and if it looks too dangerous, we go around." "Agreed, agreed," Helena said. They rode on, and as the sun began to set on their second day of travel, Harrison found himself increasingly aware of Helena's presence beside him. The way she sat her horse with growing confidence. The sound of her laugh when he made a dry observation about the landscape. The way she looked at him when she thought he was not paying attention. He had not expected to feel this way again. After Sarah, he had assumed that part of his heart was closed forever. But Helena was different from Sarah in so many ways. Where Sarah had been quiet and gentle, Helena had a fire in her that had been dampened but never extinguished. She was coming alive out here on the trail, away from the people who had tried to diminish her. That night, as they made camp, Helena surprised him by pulling out a book from her saddlebag. "I bought it this morning when you were getting supplies," she explained. "I hope you do not mind. I used some of my money." "Of course I do not mind," Harrison said. "It is your money. What did you get?" Helena held up the book, a collection of poems by Walt Whitman. "The shop owner said it is controversial," she said with a small smile. "That made me want it even more." "Read to me," Harrison asked impulsively. Helena's eyes widened. "Really?" "I would like to hear your voice," Harrison said honestly. So as the fire crackled and the stars emerged overhead, Helena read poetry aloud. Her voice was rich and expressive, breathing life into the words. Harrison found himself mesmerized not just by the poems but by the passion in her delivery. This was a woman who had been forced to hide her light for too long. When she finished, setting the book aside carefully, Harrison said, "Your stepmother was a fool to tell you to be quiet. You have a gift." Helena blushed, visible even in the firelight. "You are kind to say so." "I am honest," Harrison corrected. "There is a difference." Helena moved around the fire then, coming to sit beside him. The move was bold, and Harrison could see the nervousness in her eyes even as she did it. "Harrison," she said softly, "I need you to know something. I have never felt about anyone the way I am beginning to feel about you. I know we have only known each other for 2 days, but you have shown me more kindness and respect in that time than I have received in years." Harrison's heart was pounding. "Helena, I need to be honest with you too. I am falling for you. I did not think I could feel this way again, but I am. However, I need you to be sure this is what you want. You just escaped one unwanted marriage. I do not want to be another man trying to control your choices." Helena reached out and took his hand. Her fingers were warm and strong. "You are not controlling me, you are seeing me. There is a world of difference." She paused, then added, "I do not know where this is going between us. Maybe nowhere, maybe somewhere wonderful, but I want to find out. Do you?" "Yes," Harrison said, and then he leaned in and kissed her. It was gentle at first, tentative, both of them learning the shape and taste of each other. But then Helena's hand came up to cup his jaw, and the kiss deepened, becoming something urgent and honest. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathing hard. "Oh," Helena whispered. "Yeah," Harrison agreed, slightly dazed. They sat close together after that, Helena's head on Harrison's shoulder, his arm around her waist. They did not talk much, just enjoyed the comfort of each other's presence. Eventually, reluctantly, they separated to sleep, but Harrison lay awake for a long time, thinking about the feel of Helena's lips on his and the way his heart had come back to life. The next day brought them closer to the canyon pass. Harrison's instincts were on high alert, watching for any sign of danger. They stopped frequently to rest the horses and to scout the trail ahead. As evening approached, they reached a vantage point overlooking the canyon. Harrison pulled out the small telescope he carried and studied the pass below. Sure enough, he could see signs of habitation. A camp tucked into a rocky alcove, several horses tethered nearby, and what looked like two men standing guard. "There," he said, handing the telescope to Helena. She looked through it, her expression growing grim. "So we go around." Harrison was about to agree when he noticed something. One of the figures near the camp was smaller than the others and moving oddly. He took the telescope back and focused on that figure. A child. No, two children huddled near the fire, their hands appearing to be bound. "Damn," Harrison muttered. "What is it?" Helena asked. "They have hostages, children from the looks of it." Helena grabbed the telescope and looked again. Her face went pale. "We have to help them." "Helena, there are at least 4 armed men down there. We are just 2 people. So we leave those children to whatever fate those men have planned." Helena's eyes flashed. "I will not do that. I cannot. If you want to go around, I understand, but I am going down there." Harrison looked at her, this woman who had been abandoned and dismissed her entire life, now ready to risk everything for 2 children she did not know. His heart swelled with admiration and something deeper. Love, he realized. He was in love with her. "All right," he said. "But we do this carefully. We wait until dark, scout their camp and figure out a plan. No charging in blindly." "Deal, deal," Helena agreed. They spent the remaining daylight hours watching the camp below, learning the patterns of the guards and the layout of the area. As darkness fell, Harrison and Helena made their way carefully down the canyon wall, leaving their horses hidden above. Up close, the outlaw camp was even more concerning. 4 men, all armed, all looking dangerous. The children, a boy and a girl who could not have been more than 8 and 10 years old, were tied near the fire. They looked terrified. "Here is what we are going to do," Harrison whispered to Helena. "I am going to create a distraction on the far side of their camp. When they go to investigate, you get those children and get them back to the horses. Do not wait for me. Get them to safety." "What kind of distraction?" Helena asked. "The kind that might get me shot," Harrison admitted. "But it is the best chance we have." Helena grabbed his arm. "Harrison, no. There has to be another way." "There is not," Harrison said gently. He cupped her face in his hands. "Listen to me. Those children need to be saved, and this is how we save them. I will be careful, I promise. But if something goes wrong, you get them out. You ride to the nearest town and tell the law what happened here. Can you do that?" Tears were streaming down Helena's face, but she nodded. "I can. But you better not die on me, Harrison Everett. Nobody ever stayed before, and I am not ready to lose you." Harrison kissed her hard and fast. "I am not going anywhere. Give me 10 minutes, then be ready to move." He made his way around the camp, his heart pounding. He was not a brave man by nature, but something about loving Helena made him want to be better, braver. The kind of man who saved children from outlaws even when the odds were bad. Harrison found a good position behind a large boulder on the far side of the camp. He gathered some dry brush and smaller rocks. Then he started making noise. First, he threw rocks in different directions, creating the sound of multiple people moving. Then he lit the dry brush with a match, creating a small fire that would look like a camp. The outlaws reacted exactly as he had hoped. 3 of them grabbed their rifles and headed toward the commotion, leaving only one to guard the camp. Harrison watched as Helena slipped out of her hiding spot and moved toward the children. But then everything went wrong. The remaining guard turned and saw Helena. He shouted, raising his gun, and the other outlaws started running back toward the camp. Harrison did not think. He stood up from behind his boulder and fired his revolver into the air. "Over here," he shouted, drawing their attention away from Helena. The outlaws turned and started firing at him. Harrison ducked back behind the boulder as bullets sparked off the rocks around him. He returned fire, not trying to hit anyone, just keep them focused on him and away from Helena and the children. He heard shouting and the sound of horses. Please let that be Helena getting away, he thought. He risked a glance around the boulder and saw that the children were gone. Relief flooded through him, followed immediately by the realization that he was now pinned down by 4 angry outlaws with no way out. "Come on out," one of the outlaws shouted. "We have you surrounded." Harrison checked his ammunition. He had maybe 10 shots left. Not nearly enough. He was considering his very limited options when he heard the unmistakable sound of more horses approaching. Suddenly, gunfire erupted from a different direction. Harrison peered carefully around his boulder and saw at least a dozen riders pouring into the canyon, wearing deputy badges and firing at the outlaws. The cavalry had arrived, though Harrison had no idea how. The fight was over quickly. The outlaws, outnumbered and outgunned, threw down their weapons and surrendered. Harrison stepped out from behind his boulder, his hands raised to show he was not a threat. A deputy rode up to him. "You Harrison Everett?" "I am," Harrison said cautiously. "Miss Emerson sent us. Said you were down here taking on a gang of outlaws single-handed to save some children." The deputy actually grinned. "That is either the bravest or the dumbest thing I have heard in years." "Probably a little of both," Harrison admitted. "Where is Helena? Is she safe?" "She and the children are safe. She rode like hell to the marshal's camp about 5 miles from here. We have been tracking these outlaws for weeks, but could not pin down their location. You gave us exactly what we needed." Harrison felt weak with relief. "Can you take me to her?" "Already on my way," the deputy said. The ride to the marshal's camp felt like it took hours, though it was probably only 30 minutes. When Harrison finally saw Helena, she was sitting with the 2 children, both of whom were now wrapped in blankets and drinking warm broth. As soon as she saw Harrison, Helena jumped up and ran to him. He barely had time to dismount before she was in his arms, holding him so tightly he could barely breathe. "I thought they killed you," she sobbed into his chest. "I heard all that gunfire and I thought I had lost you." "I am here," Harrison murmured, stroking her hair. "I am all right. You did exactly the right thing. You saved those children." "We saved them," Helena corrected, pulling back to look at him. Her face was dirty and tear-stained, and Harrison thought she had never looked more beautiful. "Together." The marshal, a stern-faced man named Edward Cole, approached them. "Mr. Everett, Miss Emerson, I owe you both a debt of gratitude. Those children were taken from a farm 3 days ago. Their parents have been frantic." He paused. "There is also a substantial reward for the capture of those outlaws, $200. I would say you two have earned it." Helena and Harrison looked at each other. Give it to the children's parents, Helena said. They have been through enough. Marshal Cole nodded approvingly. You are good people. Where are you two headed? California, Harrison said. San Francisco. Long journey, the marshal observed. But I suspect you two can handle just about anything. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a letter. When you get to San Francisco, look up a friend of mine. Judge Henry Hartford. He is always looking for good people to work with. Give him this letter. Harrison took the letter, surprised. Thank you, sir. That night, Helena and Harrison finally had a chance to be alone. The children had been reunited with their parents, who had arrived at the marshal's camp with tears of joy and gratitude. The outlaws were secured and would be transported to the nearest jail in the morning. Harrison and Helena sat together under the stars, her hand in his. I really thought I had lost you today, Helena said quietly. When I heard those guns, I felt like my heart was being torn out of my chest. I am sorry I scared you, Harrison said, but I would do it again. Those children deserve to be saved. I know, Helena said. That is one of the things I love about you. You care about doing what is right, even when it is dangerous. Harrison turned to look at her. You love me. Helena met his eyes steadily. I do. I know it is fast. I know we have only known each other for a few days. But yes, Harrison, I love you. Harrison felt emotion welling up in his chest, so strong it almost hurt. I love you too, he said. I did not think I could ever say those words again, but I love you, Helena. You make me want to be the best version of myself. They kissed then, long and deep, under the vast Nevada sky. When they finally pulled apart, Harrison said, Marry me. Helena's eyes widened. What, marry me? Harrison repeated. I know it is fast. I know you just escaped one marriage, but this would be different. This would be your choice. I am not asking you to be my property or my burden. I am asking you to be my partner, my equal, the person I build a life with. Helena was crying again, but she was smiling too. Yes, she whispered. Yes, Harrison, I will marry you. They held each other close, both of them feeling like they had finally found home in each other's arms. The journey to San Francisco took another 3 weeks. Harrison and Helena stopped in a small town called Silver Creek, where they were married by a justice of the peace in a simple ceremony with 2 strangers as witnesses. There was no elaborate dress or big celebration, but Helena said it was perfect because it was real. As Mrs. Helena Everett, she seemed to grow taller, more confident with each passing day. She had chosen this marriage. She had chosen her husband, and that made all the difference. They traveled through the Sierra Nevada mountains, taking their time, enjoying the spectacular views and each other's company. At night, they would make camp and talk for hours about their dreams for the future. Harrison told Helena about his desire to settle down somewhere, maybe buy a small ranch. Helena shared her dream of opening that library she had always wanted. What if we combined our dreams? Harrison suggested one night. A working ranch with a library, somewhere people can come not just to work but to learn and grow. Helena's face lit up. Could we really do that? With the money you have, and whatever I can earn, I think so, Harrison said. It would take time and work, but we could build something meaningful together. The idea took root and grew as they continued their journey. By the time they reached San Francisco in late September 1878, they had a plan. San Francisco was overwhelming after the wide open spaces they had been traveling through. The city was crowded and noisy, with ships in the harbor and buildings packed close together. But it was also full of opportunity. Harrison and Helena found a modest boarding house near the waterfront and settled in. The next day, Harrison sought out Judge Henry Hartford, presenting the letter from Marshal Cole. Judge Hartford was a distinguished man in his 60s with sharp eyes and a kind smile. He read the marshal's letter, then looked at Harrison. Marshall Cole speaks very highly of you, says you risked your life to save 2 children from a gang of outlaws. My wife and I both did, Harrison corrected. Helena was the one who got the children to safety. Your wife, Judge Hartford repeated. Is she here? She is at our boarding house, Harrison said. Would you like to meet her? Very much, the judge said. When Judge Hartford met Helena, Harrison could see the man's respect grow immediately. Helena had a way of speaking that was both humble and confident, and she did not shy away from describing her role in rescuing the children. Remarkable, Judge Hartford said. I can see why you two make a good team. He leaned back in his chair. I will be honest with you. San Francisco has opportunities, but it is also expensive and competitive. What exactly are you looking to do here? Harrison and Helena exchanged glances. Then Harrison explained their plan. To earn enough money to buy land somewhere in California and start a working ranch with a lending library. Judge Hartford listened carefully. When they finished, he nodded slowly. I have a proposition for you. About 50 miles south of here, there is a small community called Pleasant Valley. It is growing, but it needs good people. I own some land there, about 200 acres, with a house and barn. The previous owner could not make a go of it and abandoned the place. He paused. I will sell it to you for half of what it is worth if you promise to build that library you are talking about and make it available to the whole community. Helena gasped. Sir, that is incredibly generous, but why? Because my late wife was a teacher, Judge Hartford said quietly. She believed that education and access to books could change lives. Before she died, she made me promise to support literacy whenever I could. You two are giving me a chance to honor that promise. He smiled. Besides, Marshall Cole's letter made it clear you are exactly the kind of people that community needs. Harrison felt overwhelmed by the man's generosity. Judge Hartford, I do not know what to say. Say yes, the judge replied. And promise me you will invite me to the library opening. We promise, Helena said, tears of joy streaming down her face. 2 weeks later, Harrison and Helena Everett arrived in Pleasant Valley, California. The town was small, maybe 200 people, nestled in a beautiful valley with hills rising on either side. The land Judge Hartford had sold them was perfect. Gently rolling fields, a sturdy house that needed some repairs, and a barn that could hold livestock and serve as a temporary library space. They threw themselves into work. Harrison repaired the house and barn, while Helena began cataloging the small collection of books they had bought in San Francisco with part of her inheritance. She wrote to publishers asking for donations and spread word through the community about their plans. The people of Pleasant Valley were cautious at first, not sure what to make of these newcomers. But as weeks turned into months and Harrison and Helena proved themselves to be hardworking and genuine, the community began to embrace them. Harrison got work helping neighboring ranchers, earning extra money and learning the local cattle business. Helena started hosting reading sessions in their barn, first for children, then for adults who wanted to improve their literacy. Word spread, and soon people were traveling from miles around to attend. By spring of 1879, the library was official. Helena had collected over 300 books through donations and purchases, and the barn had been transformed into a warm, welcoming space with shelves, tables, and comfortable chairs. Harrison had built it all with his own hands, working late into the night to make Helena's dream a reality. The opening ceremony was attended by nearly everyone in Pleasant Valley, plus Judge Hartford, who had traveled from San Francisco to keep his promise. Helena gave a short speech, her voice strong and clear. "Books saved me," she said. "When I felt invisible and alone, stories showed me that I mattered, that my thoughts and dreams were valid. This library is for everyone who has ever felt that way. You are welcome here. You are seen here. You matter." There was not a dry eye in the barn. Harrison watched his wife with pride and love, thinking about how far they had both come in less than a year. After the ceremony, as they walked back to their house hand in hand, Helena said, "I have something to tell you." Harrison looked at her, noting the slight nervousness in her expression. "What is it?" "I am pregnant," Helena said. "About 3 months along, I wanted to be sure before I told you." Harrison stopped walking. For a moment he could not speak. All he could think about was Sarah and baby Emma, the family he had lost. The grief and fear came rushing back. Helena saw his reaction and her face fell. "I am sorry. I know this brings up painful memories." Harrison shook his head, finding his voice. "No, do not apologize. I am not sad. I am just overwhelmed. Helena, you are giving me another chance at being a father, another chance at having a family. I never thought I would have that again." "Are you happy?" Helena asked tentatively. Harrison pulled her into his arms, holding her gently. "I am terrified and overjoyed in equal measure. But yes, I am happy. So incredibly happy." Over the next few months, Harrison became fiercely protective of Helena. He insisted she not overwork herself at the library, though Helena largely ignored him and continued her reading sessions right up until the week before she gave birth. In December 1879, on a cold but clear morning, Helena delivered a healthy baby boy. They named him Samuel Thomas Everett, Samuel for Harrison's father and Thomas for Sheriff Crane, who had shown them kindness in Taylorsville. Holding his son for the first time, Harrison felt the last pieces of his broken heart heal. He had thought losing Sarah and Emma meant he could never be happy again. But Helena had shown him that love was not a finite resource. He could honor the memory of his first family while building a new one. Sam, as they called him, was a happy baby with his mother's green eyes and his father's dark hair. The people of Pleasant Valley doted on him, and Helena would often bring him to the library, where he would sleep peacefully while she conducted her reading sessions. As Sam grew from baby to toddler, Harrison and Helena's ranch prospered. They bought cattle and horses, hired a few ranch hands, and became respected members of the Pleasant Valley community. The library continued to grow, with Helena constantly adding new books and starting new programs. In 1882, Helena gave birth to their second child, a daughter they named Sarah Emma, in honor of Harrison's first family. Helena had suggested it, saying that those two deserved to be remembered and honored. Harrison had cried when she proposed the names, overwhelmed by his wife's generosity of spirit. Sarah was a Spitfire from the beginning, strong-willed and determined. She looked almost exactly like Helena, with the same dark hair and sharp intelligence. Sam adored his little sister and appointed himself her protector from day one. The years passed in a blur of happiness and hard work. Sam and Sarah grew, the ranch expanded, and the library became the heart of Pleasant Valley. Harrison and Helena's love deepened with each passing year, built on a foundation of mutual respect, shared dreams, and the memory of how they had found each other. One evening in 1888, 10 years after they had met, Harrison and Helena sat on the porch of their home watching the sunset. Sam, now 8, was teaching 6-year-old Sarah how to rope a fence post. Their laughter carried across the yard. "You ever think about that day in the church?" Helena asked, leaning against Harrison's shoulder. "When you walked in and I thought I had reached the end of hope." "I think about it often," Harrison admitted. "I think about how close I came to just riding past Taylorsville, how different everything would be if I had not stopped." "Nobody ever stayed before," Helena said softly, repeating the words she had said to him that first night. "But you stayed. And you kept staying." Harrison kissed the top of her head. "I will always stay. You are my home, Helena, you and our children, this life we built together." "I love you," Helena said. "I love you too," Harrison replied. "Always." They sat in comfortable silence, watching their children play as the sun painted the sky in shades of gold and red. Two broken people who had found each other in the hardest of circumstances and built something beautiful together. A family, a home, a legacy of love and learning that would touch generations to come. In 1890, Helena gave birth to their third child, another boy they named Henry, after Judge Hartford, who had passed away the previous year. Henry was a quiet, thoughtful child who loved books even more than his mother did. By the time he was 3, he was already learning to read, sitting in the library with Helena, and studying the letters with fierce concentration. The Pleasant Valley Library had become famous throughout California. People traveled from San Francisco and beyond to see the lending library run by a ranch family. Helena had trained several volunteers to help her, and the collection had grown to over 2,000 books. She had also started a small school adjacent to the library, offering basic education to children whose families could not afford formal schooling. Harrison supported all of Helena's endeavors while managing the ranch, which now employed 15 hands and ran several hundred head of cattle. He had become a respected voice in the local cattle association, and often traveled to Sacramento to advocate for fair practices and better conditions for ranch workers. Despite their success and busy lives, Harrison and Helena always made time for each other. Once a week, without fail, they would ride out to a special spot on their land, a hilltop with a view of the entire valley, and spend a few hours alone together. They would talk, sometimes about serious matters, sometimes about nothing at all, and they would remember. "You ever regret it?" Harrison asked one day in 1895 as they sat on that hilltop. "The life you might have had if you had gone to San Francisco alone, maybe become a teacher or something else." Helena looked at him as if he had grown a second head. "Regret being with you, regret our children and this life. Never. Not for a single moment." She took his hand. "Harrison, you gave me something nobody else ever did. You gave me yourself, your time, your attention, your love. Everything I have built, I built because you believed in me enough to stay when everyone else left." "You did the same for me," Harrison said quietly. "I was a broken man running from grief. You showed me that it was possible to heal, to love again, to build a future instead of just surviving." They kissed, there on that hilltop, as they had done hundreds of times before. But it still felt as meaningful as that first kiss beside the fire in the Nevada desert 17 years ago. As their children grew older, Harrison and Helena began to share their story with them. Sam, Sarah, and Henry listened with wide eyes as their parents described how they had met, the confrontation with Samuel Brooks, the rescue of the children from the outlaws, and the journey to Pleasant Valley. "So you were all alone, Mama?" Sarah asked when she was 12. "And Papa just walked into the church and decided to help you?" "That is right," Helena confirmed. "Nobody ever stayed before, but your father did." "And I would do it again," Harrison added, pulling Helena close. "Every single time." The story became a family legend, told and retold, especially on anniversaries and special occasions. It reminded them all of the power of choosing to stay, to care, to take action when others walk away. In 1898, as the 19th century drew to a close, the Everett family faced a challenge. A large cattle company from back east tried to buy up land in Pleasant Valley, including the Everett Ranch. They offered an enormous sum of money, enough that Harrison and Helena could retire comfortably and never work again. The family gathered to discuss the offer. Sam, now 18 and working full-time on the ranch, argued for keeping the land. "This is our home. We cannot let some corporation take it." Sarah, 16 and training to be a teacher like her mother, agreed. "The library needs to stay here. The community depends on it." Henry, 8 and wise beyond his years, simply said, "This is where we belong." Harrison looked at Helena. "What do you think?" Helena smiled. "I think our children are absolutely right. This land represents everything we built together, our love, our dreams, our commitment to this community. No amount of money is worth losing that." Harrison nodded. "Then we turned them down." They did, and the cattle company eventually gave up and looked elsewhere. The Everett ranch remained in the family, a testament to the value of roots and commitment over profit. As the new century dawned in 1900, Harrison was 52 and Helena was 43. They had been married for 22 years and had built a life that exceeded their wildest dreams from that desperate day in Taylorsville. Sam had married a local girl named Rachel, and they were expecting their first child. Sarah was engaged to a young doctor who had recently moved to Pleasant Valley. Henry was showing signs of becoming a writer, constantly scribbling stories inspired by the books in his mother's library. The library itself had expanded into a full building, constructed with money raised by the community. It now held over 5,000 books and served as a community center, hosting events, meetings, and classes. On their 22nd anniversary, Harrison took Helena back to Taylorsville, Nevada. It was a pilgrimage of sorts, a chance to see where their story had begun. The town had not changed much. The church where they had met still stood, though it looked older and more weathered. Harrison and Helena walked inside and stood in the same spot where he had first seen her, alone and abandoned. "Nobody ever stayed before," Helena whispered, echoing her words from so long ago. "Until you." "I almost did not," Harrison admitted. "I almost rode right past the church. Something made me stop and look inside. Some instinct that my life was about to change." "I am glad you listened to that instinct," Helena said. They stood together in that church, holding hands, remembering and honoring the beginning of their love story. Then they walked out into the Nevada sun, climbed onto their horses, and headed home to Pleasant Valley. In 1905, Sam and Rachel had their second child, a little girl they named Helena, after her grandmother. Sarah and her husband Thomas had a son. Henry, now 15, had his first short story published in a San Francisco magazine. Harrison and Helena became grandparents who were actively involved in their grandchildren's lives. Helena taught them to read as early as possible, just as she had done with her own children. Harrison taught them to ride and rope, and respect the land that sustained them. The Pleasant Valley community held a celebration in 1908 to honor Harrison and Helena's 30th anniversary and their contributions to the town. The current mayor gave a speech about how the Everett family had transformed Pleasant Valley from a struggling settlement into a thriving community with one of the best libraries and schools in rural California. Harrison and Helena Everett could have taken their blessings and kept them to themselves, the mayor said. Instead, they shared everything they built with all of us. They showed us that true wealth comes from community, education, and love. Harrison and Helena stood together as the crowd applauded, their children and grandchildren surrounding them. Looking around at all the faces, many of them people whose lives had been touched by the library or the ranch, or simply by the example of what their marriage represented, Harrison felt a deep sense of satisfaction. He thought about that broken man who had ridden into Taylorsville 30 years ago, running from grief and expecting to keep running forever. He thought about the lonely bride standing in that church, believing herself unwanted and invisible. and he marveled at how two broken people had found each other and built something whole and beautiful together. That night, alone in their bedroom, Helena said, "Do you remember what you told me that first night? You said you saw me, that I was not invisible." "I remember," Harrison said. "That was the moment I started to fall in love with you," Helena said. "Not because you rescued me from a bad situation, but because you treated me like I mattered, like my thoughts and feelings were important. Nobody ever stayed before because nobody thought I was worth their time, but you did." "You were always worth it," Harrison said firmly. "You were never the problem, Helena. The people who left you were. They were too blind to see the amazing woman right in front of them." Helena kissed him softly. "I am so grateful you stopped that day, that you walked into that church, that you stayed." "So am I," Harrison said. "So am I." They held each other close, two people who had chosen each other and continued to choose each other every day for 3 decades. Their love had not dimmed with time. If anything, it had grown deeper and richer, seasoned by shared experiences, mutual support through hardships, and the joy of building a family and community together. In 1912, Harrison fell ill with pneumonia. For several terrifying weeks, Helena sat by his bedside, refusing to leave, reading to him from their favorite books and telling him stories of their life together. Their children took turns sitting with them, and the community prayed for the man who had given so much to Pleasant Valley. Harrison recovered, though the illness left him weaker. He had to reduce his work on the ranch, handing over most of the day-to-day operations to Sam. But he remained involved, advising and supporting his son while enjoying more leisurely time with Helena. "I thought I was going to lose you," Helena told him one day as they sat together on their porch. "I thought I was going to be alone again." "Never," Harrison said, squeezing her hand. "We have many years left together. I am not leaving you," and he kept that promise. Harrison lived to see his children fully grown and successful, his grandchildren become adults, and even the birth of his first great-grandchild in 1920. He watched Helena's library grow and evolve, becoming a model for other rural communities across California. On a warm summer evening in 1923, Harrison Everett passed away peacefully in his sleep, with Helena lying beside him. He was 75 years old and had lived a full, meaningful life beyond anything he had imagined possible when he rode into Taylorsville 45 years earlier. Helena was devastated by the loss, but she was not destroyed by it. Harrison had taught her that she was strong, that she mattered, that she could survive anything. Their love had healed the wounds left by everyone who had abandoned her, and that healing was permanent. She continued to run the library, mentor young readers, and spend time with her children and grandchildren. She told stories about Harrison constantly, keeping his memory alive for the younger generations who had not known him as long. When Helena Everett passed away in 1930 at the age of 73, the entire town of Pleasant Valley mourned. The library was temporarily closed so everyone could attend her funeral, where hundreds of people came to pay their respects to a woman who had touched so many lives. Helena was buried beside Harrison on a hill overlooking their ranch, the same hill where they had spent so many quiet afternoons together. A simple stone marked their grave with an inscription chosen by their children, Harrison and Helena Everett. He stayed. She bloomed. Together they built a legacy of love. But the true legacy was not in the stone or even in the thriving ranch and library they had created. It was in the lives they had touched, the example they had set, and the proof that love and commitment could transform everything. Years later, their great-grandchildren would still tell the story of the lonely bride in Taylorsville and the cowboy who walked into a church and decided to stay. They told it as a reminder that sometimes the most important decision you can make is to be present for someone when everyone else walks away. That's staying. Truly staying and investing your time and heart in another person can create ripples that last for generations. The Pleasant Valley Library still stood, now expanded into a large building with computer terminals and thousands of books. But on the wall by the entrance hung a photograph from 1908, showing Harrison and Helena Everett at their 30th anniversary celebration, surrounded by their family and community. Helena was smiling at the camera, but Harrison was looking at her, his expression one of pure love and devotion. Beneath the photograph was a plaque with the story of how the library began, ending with Helena's most famous words. Nobody ever stayed before, but Harrison did, and everything changed. And in Pleasant Valley, California, where their story had flowered into reality, those words were more than just history. They were a living reminder that love, real love, begins with the simple act of choosing to stay when it would be easier to walk away. That sometimes the greatest adventure is not in traveling far, but in committing deeply to one person and one place, and building something meaningful together that lasts long after you are gone. Harrison and Helena Everett had done exactly that. Two broken people who found each other at their lowest points and chose to stay, to heal together, to build together, and to love each other completely until the very end. Their story was proof that it is never too late to start again, that the past does not have to define the future, and that sometimes the person who changes everything is the one who simply decides to stay when everyone else leaves.